Many entrepreneurs build one business. Very few build a portfolio of companies across completely different industries and still keep the operations moving. When you are managing construction, signage, outdoor living, wholesale, food supply, restaurant operations, the challenge is not just growth, it's a system, people, delegation, operational discipline, and knowing where technology can create leverage. Today, we are going to talk about entrepreneurship, building multiple companies, operational efficiency, leadership, and how technology can help portfolio businesses scale smarter. Welcome to another edition of the Smart Office Podcast. I'm your host, Hippolyte Asa. I'm an AI implementation engineer. I help businesses operate, improve, or use AI practically or improve their operations and help them in their growth or client experience. Today, I'm excited to welcome Brad Burns, founder of the Burns Companies. Brad is a serial entrepreneur and portfolio builder whose companies span construction, graphics, and decor, installation, hardscaping and pools, wholesale food supply, and restaurant franchise operations. The Burns Companies started with Wayne Constructing in 2014 and has since expanded into several operating businesses across the Midwest. Brad, welcome to the Smart Office Podcast.
Thanks, appreciate it.
Hey, Brad, I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you. I'm glad you joined the call. I'm excited. Thank you for being here. Your story is not just about starting a business, it's about seeing opportunities in different markets, building teams and creating systems that allow multiple companies to operate at once. A lot of founders they struggle to scale one company. You have built across several industries, which makes this conversation very, very unique and interesting.
Appreciate
How
that.
are you doing? Yeah, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It could be a little bit nicer here in St. Louis weather-wise, but outside of that, I'm not too bad.
Great. I'm glad to have you. I think this conversation would be very valuable for many people across the board, operators, founders, business owners, and anybody who wants to understand how to build companies that can grow beyond just their owner, right? And let's start with your story for a bit. Before we even get into the Burns Companies, can you share a little bit of your story? How did your entrepreneurial journey actually begin?
When I was a kid, I always knew that I wanted to do something on my own. And I say kid, which means, I was in my 20s.
Right.
But just, wasn't sure exactly what that was. And, it's not like today when you can pull out your cell phone and get on Chat GPT and say, give me 100 business ideas, and it'll kick out, 100 business ideas, and it'll give you the play-by-play playbook that you need to actually get those up and running. You had to kind of just figure it out from trial and error, typically back in those days. So everybody should say, if you find something you're super passionate about, it's like you've never worked a day in your life. But all the things that I was really passionate about just were never going to make me enough money to support a family or really kind of do anything around. Now, those markets today, you can, like hiking and biking and stuff like that. But back then, it just wasn't really a big niche market. Tried a couple different things that were smaller. Never really had a mentor. Kind of grew up outside of St. Louis on a family farm. So it was more of a rural setting. So, just knew I didn't really fit in there. Knew I needed to kind of, make a pivot in my life to kind of figure out what that was going to be. And like I said, didn't really have anybody to kind of take my hand and kind of show me the direction or tell me how to do all these things. It was kind of trial and error per se. So tried to do a few different things. And then I had a situation in 2014 where I was working for a company. They decided it wasn't a good fit anymore, left there. And a bunch of people I was trying to onboard as clients were like, hey, where are you going to go? We want to follow you. We just kind of like how you operate as a business person. We feel like, we're going to get a straight shot with you, kind of a deal. It was funny. Actually, I was like, I don't even think I want to be in this industry anymore, because it wasn't necessarily what I went into after I graduated college. I was in commercial real estate and finance, and then 2008, the market kind of just dipped real bad, and had to kind of figure out what I was going to do just to, support my family, and got into the construction side of things. At the time, I was like, I don't know if I want to keep doing this. I might kind of go back to what I really want to get in, or wanted to continue to be involved in, which is, some sort of finance related opportunity. And they convinced me essentially to do projects for them while I was trying to figure out what my next step was going to be. Because they anticipated that I would probably go somewhere else that would do something similar. Like we just did a handful of projects over the first couple of months. I was like, all right, I'll make a little bit of money while I'm trying to kind of figure out what my next move is. And gradually, by the end of that 2014 year, we got a couple of contracts that kind of made it make more sense to just see if it was worth trying to kind of continue down this path and see if it led us anywhere. So we did some projects for inside of Walgreens where we did like 65 decor remodels. So it was like paint and signage and a little bit of carpentry. And then there's some projects inside of IKEA's in their kitchen areas where they had kind of those faux kitchens set up. And
Right.
I was like, all right, well, I'm making a little bit of money. We'll see if it kind of continues. I'm still going to keep kind of figuring out what I want to do. but maybe not quite as hard. In 2015, we got a relationship where they said, we'll give you these 70 fixture installs, but I want somebody that's dedicated from your team on this project. So that's 2015 is when we hired the first employee for Wayne Contracting to kind of run those projects. And I didn't really necessarily go super hard. I wasn't like nose to the grindstone that first 2014 or 2015. 2015, we started just really getting some organic momentum. And I was like, all right, well, I guess let's just see what we can make of this. And if we can, make this something real, then let's just go for it and see what happens. And fortunately, a lot of things bounced our way and we came across a lot of good people, either out in the field that were being, willing to execute these projects for us, or, internal resources where they wanted to come and be involved as part of the company. And the rest is kind of history. I guess it's
Wow.
moved the right way, and we've done. I think it could have grown faster for sure if we had if I had kind of just put my nose down and actually put like a plan of action in place, and instead of just kind of being reactive those first couple of years. But I guess it worked out that way for a specific reason. And like I said, I made a lot of errors those first couple of years and learned a lot of lessons the hard way.
Wow, that's good. That's a good story right there. Well, the Burns company started actually in 2014 with wind constructing in 2014. Am I right? What did that first business teach you about building and scaling from the ground up?
Well, I always figured out. So when I started, I was like I said, I wasn't 100% sure this is what was gonna something that was gonna make sense for us. So I just kind of gave it a shot and figured we'd just kind of run it and see what happened. We made a ton of errors those first couple of years, like I said, and a lot of it was just trying to figure out what we were going to do and how we were going to do it. So, I knew that I wanted to kind of mitigate as much risk as possible. Didn't want to overexpose myself in those first, 6 to 12 months or whatever. So our plan of action was to just reduce our overhead to as little as we possibly could. Because, a lot of guys out there in the field that were executing projects, the boots on the ground, didn't know who we were. So if we were going to hire them as the contractor, as a subcontractor to us, needed some sort of differentiator. And what it was a lot of these guys were just individual people that were going out and doing these small scale projects for us. So, I knew what generally those guys got paid. So we offered them about 20% more than anybody else was willing to pay them. And then the other thing that we did is we paid them in a week instead of making them wait 30 days to get paid, or 2 weeks or whatever it was. So they're paying a little bit more, paying a little bit quicker. And the other thing that was it's kind of disheartening to even know is a lot of these guys out there, they just don't get a lot of respect from people because they're kind of the last man on the totem pole. And if there's a mistake or an issue on the site, and it couldn't even be something that was a design error or whatever, it's always those guys' fault, or it always kind of falls on their shoulders. In the same turn, if you show those guys a ton of respect and go out there and work with them and, do everything you can to make them feel valuable, that goes a long way with these guys. So those are the things we try to focus on initially to kind of differentiate ourselves, build in the market, and just get some opportunities thrown our way. And the other thing is, from a client perspective, nobody knew who we were either. And we didn't have like a long history of executing projects. So I'd have these conversations with end users, and I would always say, all right, give me your worst project that nobody wants to do, that's been sitting on your desk, and just let us show you what, how we kind of go about and what we can execute for you. Fortunately, a lot of people kind of gave us those opportunities, and along the way, it afforded us the ability to get in and build some great relationship. In the market, in that retail type market, a lot of people will migrate from one company to the other. So you have a relationship at this company, they leave, you still have the existing relationship, and now you have a new one too. So, that was kind of the good fortune of working in the vertical that we decided to work inside of initially.
But when you look back, right, when you look back at what you've been doing, look back at your portfolio today, what connects these different things together, these different businesses? If it's the customer base, is the operating model, is the leadership structure? What connects?
You don't think seafood and construction go together? What are you talking about?
Yeah, like in general, like what connects you to these different things, these different portfolios you've been up to?
So there's a few different things. There are a few different reasons why you kind of went this direction. So if you're working with like a financial planner, they always tell you to diversify your portfolio, which is kind of what we wanted to do as well. So we looked at different verticals that maybe not necessarily even make sense to even be in the same portfolio, but there's an opportunity for us to have some diversification, knowing that sometimes the market's going to go up and the market's going to go down. If you look at COVID, those couple of years there, construction was just kind of weird especially because we work nationally. So every state had their own requirements in terms of like how many people you get on site for what durations and all those things. And that just kind of really stalled a lot of projects that year. But on the flip side, we had the concrete and hardscapes company, which did residential outdoor projects. That actually saw a significant jump in revenue and opportunity because everybody was stuck at home looking at their backyard. They had extra money. They were getting money from the government. They weren't going on vacation. And they said, well, if I'm going to be stuck here for the next year, or maybe even 2, I should probably do something to make this a little bit more palatable to look outside my back patio or whatever. We saw a big spike on that end of the spectrum, which is one of the things that really kind of helped us get through those challenging years, whenever, the market kind of shifted in a weird way. I mean, the other thing is, right. I mean, it's all processes and procedures, and I'm kind of OCD when it comes to like, everything's going to be relatively regimented. So everybody kind of knows what everybody's doing. We're super transparent. So we have like a weekly call where everybody kind of goes through the good, the bad, and the ugly for the previous week, and we talk a little bit about the next week. That way, everybody's kind of in the know, and everybody kind of knows who's working on what and what's coming up, and any challenge that we have, and we all kind of work collaboratively as a team. So that's one of the things that's, I guess, in our process and procedures that kind of helps keep everything moving in the same direction, and nobody feels like fragmented from everybody else in the company. I think the other thing is like we have a shared services model, so we've built a structure here that where we can essentially plug a person who's a great technician, so they might know signage, they might know seafood or whatever, and then we build like an infrastructure around them where we essentially share resources. We have like an accounting team that's at the holdings company level that will essentially do all the accounting work for all the companies. And we'll just kind of build down as utilized or necessary or whatever. It allows us to really kind of the same kind of ideology where we're going to minimize our upfront overhead. So it allows us to take a risk on a new company or a new technician or a new person to kind of see if we can build something around them. If it works, great. If it doesn't, we haven't necessarily added a bunch of overhead, what's going to kind of kill the rest of the holdings company or that individual entity to make it such a burden where we can't get it off the ground. So those are the things that we kind of try to focus on to kind of make sure we're all moving in the same direction and make sure that everything's kind of, all the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed kind of a deal.
Right, right. I was going to ask you this, but probably covered a little bit. What is the Burns company focused on right now? Like, what are some of the things you guys are up to at the moment? Maybe for the listeners.
We're in the process of like an acquisition of a company out of Ohio. We'll probably have a go date of 6/1, so we're kind of working through that process right now. Everything else we started from scratch, so this is a little bit different animal for us.
Okay.
It's gone relatively well. It's something that we've known for a long time in the market, so it makes it a lot easier for that. There's more transparency. There's more like let's just figure it out and kind of get it all where we need it to be at kind of a situation, as opposed to any kind of not really confrontation, standoffishness maybe or whatever. That's one of the things that are going on right now. We're looking to probably double our revenue from last year, top line, which is everybody's working a lot harder this year, which is good and
Yeah.
bad. We're doing a great job. We're just crushing it, but I'm sure there are a lot of people that'll reach a capacity point at some point this year. And that's one of the things like the weekly kind of catch ups. We talk about capacity, and if, somebody feels too much weight on their shoulders, and ultimately what we want to do is get somebody to the point to where they feel like they've got it, they're carrying a ton of weight, but not so much that they're just like bogged down and like, they're just can't handle it kind of a deal. So we want, we want to test, well, not test people. We want to challenge people to kind of be the best version of themselves, and try to max out their skill set for sure. And then once you kind of reach that point, then we'll add additional resources internally to do what we can to offset some of that load. And then that'll allow us to even continue to scale it to bear.
Well, that sounds good. I know we're talking about industries here. You may have stories you want to share to our listeners. Can you share a moment when you realized the Burns companies could become more than just one business? Like maybe a story, something that just come off your mind?
Yeah, so we started the signage company in 2019, BizX, and that kind of rolled out of a project that we had for Wayne Contracting. So graphics, it's a unique animal. There's some elements of graphics that, that requires a high level of skill, and some of it's just industry knowledge where, like this specific type of wall vinyl will only go on this type of substrate kind of a deal. You got to understand like the paint that you're utilizing on walls to make sure that it's, the vinyl will adhere correctly and stuff like that. So, we were doing a lot of like fixture installation and light carpentry type work in 2019.
Right.
And we got a call from a client who said, "Hey, we have this issue up in Minneapolis. There's a company that was doing some graphic installation and they're just not doing a great job. And you go and fix it." And we had done some graphics work, not a ton, but I knew that my partner, Max, who's now my partner in the company, worked at his family-owned print shop for several years, and it helped me out with some of the other localized graphics installations that we had here in the St. Louis area. And I was like, yeah, I can figure it out. Without even talking to him, without even knowing, it was just like an automatic response because when you're first getting going the first couple of years, it's like you just throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And if something pops up that's more advantageous for the company or something that you guys can add with relative ease to expand your service offering or your geographic footprint or whatever it is, and you try to do that if you can. So I reached out to him. I said, "Hey, Max, you helped me out with these projects before in St. Louis. This is what I got going on." He's like, "All right, let's just book a flight, get up there with some guys, we'll get it figured out." And went up there, completed the project, left, came back. The company that we worked for went to go QC the site, walk through the project, reach out to us, said, "Hey, you guys did an amazing job. why don't you guys come back up and let's talk about like what happened and what we do to mitigate this from ever happening again. So to run that same situation down the road. And I was like, yeah, that's fine. So me and Max flew up there. We're walking to this retail location. I look at him like, I have no idea what we're going to say. And he's like, oh, I got this. Don't worry about it. We're good. So we walk in, it's the client, it's the design company, it's the manufacturer, it's the material supplier, and they're all standing there. You can tell they've all known each other for a while. And he just kind of goes, here's what you guys used. Here's what didn't work. Here's what I did to make it work. Here's what you should have used and why. And just talk for maybe like 25 minutes about all those things. And at the end of it, the guy from the material supplier 3M was like, you know what, that actually, in hindsight, that makes a lot more sense in this specific application. Let's do that moving forward and we should be good. So that kind of quelled everything right there in terms of like our knowledge and skill set, I guess, in relation to graphics. We went around, looked at the rest of the store, talked about it, and they were like, you guys are doing all of our graphics from here on out. And I was like, perfect deal. So we came back to St. Louis. Max goes back to work at his print shop, just locate some guys across the country that I know have those skill sets. And we started doing graphics work. And it was probably a year after we went down that call in Minneapolis where I convinced Max to kind of make the transition from a family print shop into this signage graphics company that now works in the United States, Canada, the Caribbean. We've done a project in Spain. We've got a project in Japan. There's some interest in us doing some work in Europe in the next year or so. It's definitely a far cry from, a little print shop here in St. Louis. So, I know it's definitely challenging his skill set and making him kind of think outside the box quite a bit. So it's a really neat deal to see.
Right. Seem to have is not for seeing opportunities, right? What opportunity in that story did you see that others might have missed?
Well, so it was like, let's just see what happens with it. And then once we did that, part of it was, carpenters that are skilled finishers have a lot of skill that they can utilize for graphic installation. Maybe not necessarily every component of a graphics installation, but there's the opportunity to uptrain them and, add those skills to what they already do because they're already looking at like precise measurements and really precise cuts and things like that. And just, the application of those skills across carpentry kind of translate into graphics pretty well. Essentially what we looked at was we have a wide breadth of resources across the country that have those existing carpenter skills. Is there a way for us to, essentially add some additional skills to what they already have in terms of what they can comprehensively do installation wise, and then add this as a just an add-on tack-on service to our existing service offerings. That was more what that focus was. Some of the other companies, they're different things, gaps in the market. But I think the biggest thing with Max was, I looked at him and, I could see like he just had this wealth of knowledge, a skill set that was far above what he was getting paid to do. We always kind of joke and tell him he was arguing over like 50 cents off a t-shirt order when, we should have been dealing with multi-million-dollar companies trying to figure out how to facilitate their entire programs. I think that there may have been a little bit of doubt to begin with, but now, he's extremely confident in what we can do and our skill set and our abilities as an organization. And, we continually push the envelope to kind of reach those new heights every single day. So it's been a cool transition to see. Like I said, he was just kind of undervaluing his skill set. That was one of the biggest things I could see. Like there was an opportunity for us to essentially, move our way up the food chain. Typically installation companies kind of the last person on the food chain. They don't get much of a say. Something goes wrong, they typically get blamed for it. But with his skill set, we were able to kind of usurp some of the traditional like layers and create additional value that the end users saw as, a new way to kind of do things. And that's kind of the focus that we have right now is, getting in there and making sure that once we site, everything's already figured out. There's no like, the designer designed this. They never installed anything. They don't understand the nuances of how this would go in or why this won't work or whatever. We've already had all this conversation, get there, we execute quickly, communicate really well, and everybody seems to be responsive to that.
This episode of the Smart Office podcast is sponsored by EveryBrain AI. Most businesses are not losing money because they lack good people. They are losing money because too many things still depend on manual follow-up, missed calls, slow response times, and repetitive admin work. That is where EveryBrain AI comes in. We build AI implementation and automation systems that help your business run smarter. From AI receptionists and smart scheduling, to lead qualification, workflow automation, client follow-up, and multi-channel lead generation. Imagine having a system that answers inquiries, qualifies prospects, books appointments, follows up automatically, and helps your team focus on the work that actually grows revenue. And The best part is it is fully done for you. No long-term contracts, no complicated tech headaches. Most systems can be live in 5 to 10 days. So whether you want to save time, cut overhead, or generate more qualified leads, Everybrainer AI can build the automation your business needs. Visit everybrainerai.com and book your free strategy call today. Everybrainer AI, we build AI that runs your business. Let me ask you, after building across multiple industries like this and sectors, graphics, and the rest, what is one lesson you wish more entrepreneurs really understood about growth or growing a business?
Yeah, not to be scared of it.
Yeah, okay. Take
Yeah, I
more
mean,
risk.
yeah, I think, like I was talking to somebody this morning and they want to do something on their own. The challenge is that they just kind of keep talking themselves out of it. So I think a lot of people, they get to a point to where they're making enough money to where they're comfortable and they don't necessarily, want to rock the boat too much and try to push for that next level that could really ultimately change theirs and all their employees' lives for the better. So I think that's the biggest thing is like, don't let the fear consume you. I mean, as an entrepreneur, you're always scared of something because you just never know. Like the market could go crazy, like in 2008 or during COVID or whatever, there could be something like that to where it's just completely out of your control. And then there'll be things that are in your control where you just make a bad decision or make an error in judgment. It doesn't go necessarily the way you want it to. It can't you know, it can't freeze you from doing anything else. I mean, you need to just continue to take chances and risks, but obviously don't take them blindly, be thoughtful and kind of think through the potential risk and upside and downside. And is the investment worth it or not? So, I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is if you really want something in life, just go for it and see what happens. I mean, I've had a ton of people that I've talked to that, work traditional employment role, W-2 roles, and they say they want to kind of get out of what they're doing day to day and do something like I'm doing or own their own company or whatever. And I'm like, just figure out what your runway is. You have 2 years of capital that you can operate off of if you need to. And, make a commitment to yourself. Like this is my expectation. And when I'm closing in on that 2-year timeline, and if you're there or you've done better, then just keep going. And if for some reason you've not done as well as you wanted to, then you can make a decision. Do I keep going or do I just go back to what I'm doing? Especially in this marketplace, if you're good at what you were doing in a W-2 day-to-day job, somebody will give you an opportunity. It's not like once you try to be an entrepreneur, you can never go. I mean, either works or it doesn't. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is just, kind of not letting your fears get the best of you and
Exactly.
no matter what.
A lot of people talk about delegation when it comes to people with your portfolio, delegating, but they struggle to do it well. With somebody with their portfolio with multiple things happening at the same time and across multiple businesses, how do you think about trusting people while still maintaining the same level of expectations or standards? Like you probably shared a little bit about that earlier on.
Yeah, I mean, we have a kind of a culture of accountability here where it's not necessarily like we don't believe in micromanagement at all.
Right.
Be enough rope to hang yourself kind of a deal. We understand when we bring somebody out new to the team that there's going to be a period of time where they're going to have to kind of get their feet underneath of them, understand how we do things, the process, the procedures, the expectations, and once you get to like month 5 or 6, you should have a pretty comprehensive understanding of what you're trying to accomplish day in and day out and, long term organization. If you can't do that, what I tell everybody is you should just, get a box and pack your stuff and leave. Because if you're asking me goofy questions 6 months from now, you should have been asking me the first couple of weeks, then it's probably not the right spot. Everybody here works really hard where we're super busy and, it's more like I trust you. You make the right decision. If you want to talk about it, we can. But ultimately, if it's your decision inside of a role that you have and it's your responsibility, then the expectation is that you'll kind of take that ownership of that role and kind of make it what you want it to be and make those decisions on your own. So, we like I said, I think the weekly catch ups are a good accountability measure. It gives everybody that they kind of understand what everybody's doing and nobody wants to come to those meetings and be like, hey, I didn't accomplish anything last week kind of a deal because so it's not necessarily like, we're like, hey, these are your KPIs and everything else. It's as a company, here's what we're trying to achieve. You understand your roles and responsibilities. And then what you're going to have to do is tell everybody what you accomplished this last week. That if you're the type of person that is competitive and works hard and has a good drive, then you want to come to those and kind of be somebody that's got a lot done for that week. And that your other teammates can look at you and be like, wow, that was a good week, kind of a deal. And I think it's just giving people enough rope to kind of hang themselves is I think the adage that a lot of people say. We're more of a, let you kind of show us whether you want it or not. And if you do, great. If you don't, then we'll figure it out really quick.
So you kind of operate in different spaces, right? Like I mean, sometimes people look at it like when it comes to the burns company, you are a little bit construction, signage, graphics, a lot of things that you do at the same time. How do you evaluate whether there's a new business opportunity is worth pursuing or not? Like based on your history, based on your experience, how do you decide?
It gets harder and harder. I feel like we've had so much success that I feel like any opportunity I touch that we can make it work. So
Yeah,
it's probably a scary thing to be in. At that point, your career or whatever. A lot of it's about the people. I would say like I have partners in four of the I'll have partners in five of the companies minus my contractor that I own 100% of. And a
right.
lot of it is do we have comparable ideologies? Do they want it as bad as I do? Are they looking to do something that's far beyond anything they've done? Do they have like this goal of like, like a paradigm shift? Are they open to those type of scenarios? Are they hardworking? There's just a lot of like intangible things. It's kind of like when you're dealing with building like a sports team. You look at things and you're like, all right, this person has the intangible skill of drive. They have aggression. They're willing to be physical. The things that are the skill things, a lot of them, you want some people that have a base of skill to come in when you're trying to bring them on into an organization. But a lot of stuff, it's like we can help you learn or train or evolve your skill set to be more in line with what we need or whatever. A lot of it's about the individual as opposed to, not, I mean, obviously, if you're gonna hire somebody for accounting, you want them to have an accounting background, but there's some intangible things too that really kind of will separate somebody from the next person that you're talking to in terms of like an opportunity. As long as they have those kind of skills where I can, and a lot of it's for me is just a gut feeling. It's like, all right, I can feel like this person wants it like I did, and
Right.
there's an opportunity to do something, and then we kind of essentially I'll put together like a pro forma. We'll back out the numbers. What does it take to get this thing moving off the ground? And am I willing to invest that to see if it'll work or not? So that's kind of the criteria that we utilize. And obviously there needs to be, an opportunity too, some sort of gap in the market or there's this, under skilled, the market's underskilled or whatever. We can just, some way that we can have a little bit of a differentiator and then the right people and then let's just go and see what happens.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's interesting. Hey, Brad, with everything the Burns companies is building across, I mean, several businesses, like what are you most focused on improving right now with the business? Do you have some areas that you think you need to improve upon?
I mean, not maybe necessarily improve upon. I mean, probably the biggest thing is for me to understand the evolution of my role.
Right.
Each of the companies in the first few years, I was relatively heavily involved in kind of putting together the processes and procedures and figuring out workflows and how we're going to do
Hmm.
things. And I'm just kind of understanding the market because, I don't have a background in all of these things. So
Right.
haven't I had to learn along the way. But right now, we got to a point to where I'm not necessarily required in the day to day of any of these businesses. So now my role over the last 12 months has kind of evolved, and I'm trying to. It's funny. I actually have been working on this the past few weeks, trying to figure out, like, okay, what is the evolution of my responsibility look like? What do I need to do for these companies? What information do I need to share with everybody? How do I need to kind of approach everybody inside these organizations from like this new role that I'm trying to kind of figure out what it's going to be for myself. So I think that's the biggest probably thing that we need to do now is we need to evolve as an organization. So I need to kind of look longer term and figure out what that needs to look like for myself and also some of our the key people inside the organizations.
Yeah. Wow. Let's say in the next 6 to 12 months, they really went really well for you. What would be the difference across the businesses? Like, would it be acquiring more businesses? Would it be improving on internal processes? Would it be creating more work-life balance? What area would you really think going to work very well in the next 6 to 12 months?
I'm sure that we're gonna increase our portfolio. I mean that's kind of the goal.
Yeah.
I've seen some of these companies and these organizations own like 60 or 70 companies. Are like, man, how do I get to that point? Kind of a deal. I mean, that's a long ways off. But, so I think it'll be like, figure out the evolution of what we're going to do as an organization. Before there, I didn't really set out with I guess the goal of being like, we're going to be a multi, vertical,
Right.
kind of like little private equity company kind of a deal. It just kind of evolved into that. And now I have to figure out like, okay, now we're like, just kind of like what I was talking about. We're evolving into something that I think can be way, way bigger. And I just kind of got to build a roadmap for myself, all the organizations, my partners, all of our employees to
Right.
kind of make sure that we're all moving in the same direction. Because we could develop plans for the individual entities, but there never was like an aggregate plan for everything. So
Right.
that's another probably gap that we have is just trying to kind of figure out what, as an organization, long term we want to be.
Sounds okay. Sounds great. Where do let's talk a little bit about technology. Given my background, I'd like to hear from you. Probably where companies so are down with technology. Where do you see technology creating the most leverage across probably a portfolio of operating companies like yours? Like, how does technology help, especially
I mean, I
in
would think
today's evolution?
it would be a multiplier, to be completely
Yeah,
honest. I think probably everybody inside an organization has admin type related tasks or data related tasks that are low hanging fruit to just improve efficiency overall for sure. And down the road, there's probably things that will present themselves that will, kind of, I guess, afford opportunities outside of those things to become even more efficient and allow people to really focus on the high value things inside of their roles instead of, a bunch of the stuff that just seems kind of like a time suck for sure. So, I think that's probably the biggest immediate opportunity, especially for our organizations. Like there's probably some low hanging fruit, like in accounting, to where you could, do reconciliations, and that would process from, being somebody looking at it for a whole day to, probably like, you throw it
how
at
about
an AI thing, and it's probably, a 1 60-second deal to reconcile, a month's worth of bank statements.
right? How about lead management or maybe estimation or
Oh yeah,
scheduling, maybe
right, for sure. I mean, there's
marketing?
probably things that we could do now. I heard of a company. We kind of transitioned the concrete real estate company into a pool and outdoors company,
Right.
and somebody I can't remember where I heard it from, but they said that there was a service now to where this company will take like a GIS overhead view of a parcel, pop in like a pool or like something in the backyard, and then it'll create like a rendering that you can either mail out or you can email out to the potential customer. And I mean, I think that's a game changer. It's just stuff like that makes that process a lot faster, a lot more expeditious, and you can get a wider reach. It's a lot neater than your traditional like, oh, here's what we do, kind of a static photo kind of a situation.
I mean, companies are now implementing maybe lead generation or things like that. So let's ask a little bit about let me say, if you could remove one repetitive task from your leadership team or operating companies, what would it be? Like something that keeps coming up. You feel like it takes time, it's repetitive, it's manual, it
So
doesn't,
many.
it doesn't. I'm sorry, so many.
Yeah.
Maybe an example of something that is manual that probably shouldn't even be there, something that maybe one example that comes to mind.
I mean, I would say like for a couple of the companies, sometimes you got to beat down a door 10 or 15 times before somebody will give you the time of day. And I know from like a business development perspective, when you're in that role, a lot of the times those become kind of the boring targets because you're just not getting any feedback. And you kind of sometimes let those kind of fall to the wayside or, not necessarily invest a ton of or effort and, you know, workflow into that. So there's a way to like, you have a CRM database and you have customers in there that you can show. I mean, like ours right now, you can show like when our last communication was or when our last touch point was. If there's a way to like, okay, we haven't touched this person in 3 weeks. Let's just auto hammer them for the next, year to year and a half. And if something comes of it, great. If it doesn't, then whatever. It would come out of our business development person's, email address or whatever, or come from a phone number that went back to his if there was like a text component of that or whatever. I mean, I know you can switch to where, you can actually have a call too, but I'm not necessarily sure we're at that point yet. But if you automate some of those like low hanging fruit like opportunities to where it's like if you don't continue to push them, it's going to kind of fall off the grid kind of a deal, and then maybe it's not on something because a lot of it's just timing and hitting the person at the right time, and they have it kind of matches your offering. So if you consistently are reaching out to them, and it's not necessarily something that you need to do manually, if there's a way to automate that process, just touch points, and I think that would be helpful for sure.
Wow. So, I mean, where can people learn more about you or the Burns companies? Like, if the listeners, they want to learn about you, they want to know more about you, probably reach out.
Yeah, you can find me easy on LinkedIn. It's just Brad W. Burns on LinkedIn. We have a website that kind of aggregates all the companies, so it's www.theburnscos.com. That has like hyperlinks to all of our entities, so that's probably the most efficient way to kind of look at all the opportunities that we have. And then I have a personal website where it's just www.bradwburns.com, and it's ways to reach out to me directly.
Wow, that's good. I'm glad to have you here. Well, Brad, thank you for joining me on the Smart Office podcast. I really appreciate your insight on entrepreneurship, delegation, folio growth, building companies that can scale beyond one person. Been glad to have you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. Great to talk to you.